Priests in the Philippines are trusted and loved. But what happens when that power is exploited? Despite growing reports of sexual misconduct inside Asia's biggest Catholic church, it's all been kept hidden behind closed doors. I'm Steve Chow. On this edition of 101 East, we investigate sexual misconduct in the most powerful institution in the Philippines, the Catholic Church.
Okay, si Christine.
On the remote Filipino island of Guimaras, baby J Crystal is being welcomed into the Catholic faith. Her father, Elmer Cahilig, is among the many celebrating her baptism. But this is no ordinary ceremony, because Cahilig is a Catholic priest who took a vow of celibacy. Father Cahilig has a long-term partner, Joy, and 3 other children, all named after the most important figure in his life.
First of all, I am a priest, the messenger also of God through Jesus Christ. So that's why I call them, JC. So that Jesus Christ, J. Chris, J. Christian, J. Christine, and J. Christil. Yeah. Just to remind them that they are the sons and daughters of Jesus Christ.
Father Cahilig's decision to have children puts him at odds with the Vatican's sacred law for ordained priests to be celibate. It's considered sexual misconduct and a sin. But Cahilig wants Rome to reconsider.
We made a lot of noise already, as we call it noise, in order for us to be heard by our bishops and also by Rome. We wrote letters, we sent emails in order for them to accept us.
But according to Catholic officials, the point of celibacy is to devote your entire life to make that sacrifice to God.
Yeah, correct, that's correct.
Aren't you showing disrespect to God?
In the church, when we talk about celibacy, this was only a man-made rule. God did not say this. So I think I cannot say that I have committed sin. I am just continuing His mandate to go and multiply.
Father Cahilig and 2 other priests who also fathered children were kicked out of the diocese. So they set up their own self-styled Catholic ministry where they preach at privately owned churches to a supportive congregation. Cahilig wanted to be a priest since he was a child.
First of all, it was like a priest is there in the altar, advising people, telling them what to do. That was the start of my vocation. And of course, they have also good lives. They're living, they have good food, everything. To be a priest is comfortable.
Here in one of the world's biggest Catholic nations, there's a chronic shortage of priests, so most worshippers just accept who they can get. But senior church figures condemn the 3 men as disgraceful renegades.
They're like sociopaths. They're making use of the Catholic Church. They're making use of the fact that they have a semblance of being priests to further their own needs. And that's really dishonest,
Essentially, Father Cahilig is presenting himself as a Catholic priest. What can you do about that?
Nothing, because the church will have... Right now, that priest has been, it's not exactly excommunicated, but he's outside of the church. The church can do anything about him.
As secretary of the country's Canon Law Society, Father Jaime Achacoso's job is to advise the faithful and keep the clergy in line. In some dioceses, he says 1 in 5 priests have fathered children.
That's horrendous, They're doing so much harm. But the bishop is caught between the devil and the deep blue sea, so to speak, that if he has this priest, and he's the only ones he has, to say Mass, to attend to the needs of the faithful, and if they're misbehaving, he's caught. Do I fire them? Then who will say Mass, etc.?
An uprising will
In the capital Manila, retired Archbishop Oscar Cruz heads up an internal tribunal that investigates allegations of sexual misconduct against Filipino clergy. He admits some senior church figures are reluctant to punish a priest who has fathered a child.
Is it fair to say some of your colleagues condone this practice?
I think that is possible. I concede that. But the way I see it, our culture has been impacted by a lot of immoral practices, little by little, little by little. And so that there are more and more cases of these clerical abuses.
But Archbishop Cruz says these abuses by Catholic clergy can be far more sinister than fathering children. The cases he investigates include the sexual abuse of vulnerable children, even rape. He handles up to 60 cases at a time and says it's the tip of the iceberg because bishops can investigate cases in their own diocese without bringing them to his tribunal.
There are 82 jurisdictions in the Philippines, 82. When say 82, archdioceses, dioceses, prelatures, etc., etc. And supposing they'll send the cases all here, I might drown.
Archbishop Cruz is speaking out to condemn that abuse.
I may be now offending a lot of my fellow bishops, but it's a personal stand. Gone are the days when you can just close your eyes and plug your ears, the bishop, as if nothing is happening.
From your experience of investigating cases, are we seeing a rise in rates of sexual misconduct within the church?
Yes, because the people in the urban areas have become rather alert and courageous in denouncing the errancy of priests.
What about pedophilia? Are there more reported cases?
Yes. More reports on pedophilia and homosexuality. More. It is heinous crime, you know. And a priest at that, violating a minor, come on. There must be something wrong there.
Clerical abuse of children is not a new issue in the Philippines. Some victims have borne the scars for years.
Yeah, for prayers and the cross.
It was not the church that I read from my books in my Catholic high school. It was not the same church that I've heard from the priest's homilies. It was basically a mafia doing a concerted effort to drive me out.
At the age of 17, Michael Gatchalian served as an altar boy in Cebu's main basilica. He loved the responsibility and freedom of going to church without his parents. It was at the basilica where he and the other altar boys met the charismatic Father Apolinario Mejorado.
He was very warm. In fact, he's one of the more sought-after priests there. Not like the other priests who, if you meet them, it's like you just give their hand out for you to bless, but he would actually interact with most people. He would ask us out, go out to have dinner elsewhere, watch movies. He was really like a magnet.
One evening, after a busy Sunday Mass, Father Mejorado took Michael and another altar boy to the movies. Inside the dark, empty cinema, Michael says the priest reached over and began fondling him.
That was the day I could never forget. I think it stunned me. It stunned me to a point that I could not even really describe how I felt. But I vividly recall what happened. I could even remember that he whiffed out a hanky with some weird smell on it and he wiped it on my face.
Smell of incense.
He just said, "You smell of incense, you should take a shower." His hand was so heavy, I tried lifting it off. His hand was, I think out of surrender, I just pretended to fall asleep thinking that he might stop doing what he was doing at that time.
But instead of stopping, Michael says Father Mejorado began molesting the other altar boy.
He acted like he was not doing anything bad at us.
Please don't. Please don't.
Around the same time, halfway across the world, allegations of clerical sexual abuse surfaced in the US, and the church was swamped by a tsunami of complaints. In 2002, Filipino bishops drafted these guidelines to investigate sexual misconduct within their own ranks. But the Vatican wouldn't approve them because they included a controversial clause, one which pardoned priests who had fathered a child. It took a decade for that clause to be removed and to pass the guidelines. During that time, Father Achacoso admits a lot of damage was done.
During this period from 2001 to 2013, which is fairly recent, without these guidelines, you have to concede investigations were probably not handled well.
Oh yeah, they weren't, unfortunately. And the inadequate investigations in the past have festered, so things have not been solved. Priests continue to be there.
What do you mean by priests continue to be there?
Meaning to say, those priests who are guilty of sexual misconduct, they continue in the ministry.
Until 101 East started investigating, Father Achacoso wasn't aware that the Vatican had in fact approved the new guidelines on sexual misconduct in 2012. As a result, many churches here didn't know they existed.
I was going to keep that from you because it's very embarrassing, no?
What aspect makes it embarrassing?
Because it was misplaced. No? I mean, the document is one page, no? Saying approved. Well, that was misplaced. Okay? Now that it has come to fore, you can be sure that it will be disseminated immediately.
These internal guidelines matter because no one outside the church scrutinises the conduct of Catholic leaders, including the government. In fact, the church wields incredible political influence in the Philippines, toppling 2 presidents and lobbying against government policies. Over 80% of Filipinos follow Catholicism, and it underpins every pillar of society here.
So if clerical abuse victims take on the most powerful institution in the Philippines, it's a David and Goliath battle.
In 2014, a 15-year-old choir girl says she was sexually assaulted by a priest at her local village church. We'll call her Imelda.
First, he told me to sit on his lap. That's when I started to feel nervous. I felt my heart beating so fast, like it was going to burst. He said he would kiss me, but only on the forehead. Then he started hugging me. After that, he told me to give him a massage.
She says the priest then tried to grope her.
I was crying and shaking so much. I really couldn't believe it. Why did he do that to me?
Imelda reported the matter to police, but her God-fearing family forced her to drop the complaint.
They actually beat me to the point that I was afraid to go home. They were angry at me. They were telling me that what I did was wrong. They treated me like a stray dog because of what I did, because I filed a case.
Imelda claims 2 church members then paid her $150 to keep silent. For a village girl from a poor farming family, such money is a fortune.
At first, I really didn't want to accept the money because I knew it was from the priest. But they were so insistent that I take it.
101 East understands the priest is still working in another community.
The reality is,
Marianne Aldea, a former nun, is one person who helps church abuse victims. She says she often hears of cases like Imelda's.
The most recent was last week. I received a text, and the mother told me that my daughter confessed. She could not sleep, she could not eat, so Then she confronted the daughter, and the daughter told her about these things.
Marianne says in another recent case, the victims have barely started school.
How young are the children?
The youngest is 6.
She concedes because of fear and intimidation, it's impossible to know the scale of clergy abuse in the Philippines.
They don't talk about it because they are afraid that they will be cursed, or God will curse them if they go against these people.
Church authorities claim not a single priest has ever been found guilty of sexual misconduct in the Philippines. 101 East knows of one priest who was convicted, but he was exonerated on appeal.
The church is not just a religious institution. The church is also a political institution, and that's the reality. The power of the church is so big that you cannot really pursue these things. We will never win.
Michael Gatchalian is one of the few victims of clergy abuse who tried to take on the Filipino Catholic Church. 2 years after being molested, Michael and 3 other altar boys who also said they were abused by Father Meharada lodged a complaint with the church.
I could still recall the phrase, "You write the letter." That's it. The other priest, who was our former spiritual director, he said, "We will just pay them. They're going to get paid anyway." I was really insulted at that time. It was like their dog has bitten somebody and they're telling the victim to, "Don't worry, we'll pay you anyway."
Like Imelda, the boys were given money, $9,000 to not press charges. They were told Father Meharada would be rehabilitated and reassigned to a parish in Africa. But only a year later, Michael saw him wandering the grounds of Cebu's Basilica.
So I shouted at him, "Father!" Then he looked at me, and when he recognized it was me, he just waved at me as if saying, "Hello, how has it been?" I was afraid that a lot of young kids will be exposed with him again. So that was the time I decided to take legal action.
Michael says the prosecutors initially supported his child abuse criminal complaint against Father Meharada. But Meharada tried to discredit the boys, citing they were smoking and gambling, and the judge and prosecutor both reversed their decision.
The reviewing prosecutor said that my behavior, the way I acted, was not that of a child. That was his justification. So he decided to drop the charges. He recommended that the charges against Father Meharada be dismissed.
Do you feel dark forces were at play behind that decision?
Oh yes, there's no doubt about it. At that time, and even until now, what you have are the faces of the priests, but they're not the ones whose hands are playing the justice system. They have powerful friends, they have benefactors, they have people who want to be associated as being close to the church. So that's the scary part.
Just to begin with...
The church assigned Father Ned Disu to investigate Father Meharada. He then defended the priest in court. Father Disu says the outcome was fair, despite the priest's admission of guilt.
First, in fairness to this guy, Father Meharada, he admitted of the case, and he said, "I am willing to go to jail for this."
So why didn't he go to jail?
Because the court threw in the garbage.
The case was thrown in the garbage?
Yes. Because it was clear that they were just after money, but they had a deal already with him. We've heard counseling.
But if he was a normal human being, he would probably be in jail.
Well, if that is the finding of the court, so be it. But the case was thrown to the garbage.
Father Disu has handled 5 other clerical sexual abuse cases in Cebu. Every case was either dismissed or settled out of court.
In those cases, did you know the accused priest before you began the investigation?
Oh, yes.
So you knew all of them?
Oh, yes, yes.
Would you say your relationship with them was close?
Oh yes, they're friends. We are all friends in the priesthood.
But when a friend is scrutinising the conduct of another friend, can they be impartial?
Oh yes, I think so. Can you not? Our aim is not really who is guilty or not guilty. We find what is the truth and what would be the best for each individual. In my own experience, it is better resolved behind closed doors.
Were the priests allowed to continue working?
Yes. Yes.
And this was the case with Michael's abuser, Father Meharada. 101 East understands the church moved him from Cebu to Manila, then out to a number of rural communities.
This Catholic directory lists all the priests in the Philippines, and it says that Father Meharada is working right here in the province of Sorsogon.
It's a farming region, home to vulnerable and impoverished communities. Considered one of the most devout corners of the country, it's the perfect place to put a problem priest. And this is Father Meharada's church. Inside, we find he is still preaching and enjoys unfettered access to some of the youngest members of his congregation. We try to talk with Father Meharada, but he refuses to meet with us. Instead, his church superior responds by phone on his behalf.
Well, he molested a number of altar boys in Cebu. Are you aware that he has a history of molesting young men?
The superior tells me he knows about Father Meharada's history.
And that doesn't concern you? I mean, there are...
But he insists the troubled priest has been rehabilitated and describes him as a transformed man who doesn't pose a risk to young members of his congregation. The church may not be concerned, but the local mayor wants to investigate him. She was shocked to hear that they'd moved a priest with such a troubled past to an area with a high number of schools and a young population.
In this place, we would like our children to be safe, to be protected, and so as of now, I would like to see the records, the legal papers surrounding that priest, and I have to investigate because, as you said, he is assigned to our place. I will do what should be done.
Now a parent himself, Michael worries Father Meharada may prey on other young children.
There's still a churchman in me who would deeply wish that he should be given a second chance. But there's also the pessimist in me that the church, as of this time, does not have that faculty to rehabilitate priests like him.
In a frank admission, Archbishop Cruz agrees that church rehabilitation for priests rarely works in the Philippines.
If you have this character flaw, if you have this personality disorder, it goes with you till the kingdom comes, so to speak. And there, yes, guidance and counseling can lessen it, etc., but it doesn't cure, really.
Are rehabilitated priests allowed back in the community that shouldn't be?
Precisely. They're just transferred here, they're transferred there. It's the same person you're transferring. He will commit the same mistakes wherever he is.
Despite admitting that there are clear weaknesses in the system, Father Achacoso believes only the Catholic Church can police its priests.
The church handled these cases with a lot of discretion, both to protect the dignity of the good name of the priest, and also for the victim.
So you're saying the public has to accept that the best agency to investigate the church is the church itself?
I think so, definitely.
The Vatican didn't respond to our inquiries about clergy abuse in the Philippines. But the fact that Asia's largest Catholic church is avoiding scrutiny is not lost on the main investigator of clergy abuse.
We still have a long way to go, because we have too many Catholics. The judges are Catholics, The lawyers are Catholics. The accusers are Catholics. The accused is a Catholic. Yes, it has its own disadvantage.
The church remains a strong guiding presence across the Philippines. But there are serious failings in how it deals with clergy abuse and misconduct. Its secrecy and unchallenged power is leaving the most vulnerable at risk in this devout nation.